Who was Baal, the deity who battled the sea, death, and God before becoming a demon? In the ancient Near East, gods were not distant or abstract beings, but powerful forces intertwined with the very fabric of life. They controlled the heavens, the earth, and the sea, shaping the lives of those who revered them. Among these gods, one stood above many as a symbol of immense power, the god of storms, rain, and fertility, Baal. Baal was not just a deity. He was the force of life and death, of growth and destruction, reigning over the skies with thunder and lightning, and commanding the seas with his storm wrath. To the people of Canaan and the ancient Semitic cultures, Baal was both protector and destroyer, his very presence capable of blessing crops or wreaking havoc on the land. But how did this once celebrated deity, the bringer of rain and abundance, who stood at the center of worship for many ancient civilizations, come to be demonized in later religious traditions? What caused Baal to evolve from a revered storm god into a symbol of evil, chaos, and rebellion? The answer lies in the shifting tides of history, religion, and power, forces even more unpredictable than the storms Baal himself commanded. His origins lie in the ancient Canaanite pantheon, where he was revered as one of the most powerful gods. Known as the storm god, Baal was the deity responsible for the forces of nature, particularly rain, thunder, and lightning. His power over storms made him vital to the survival of the agricultural societies that worshipped him. As a storm god, he was seen as the one who could bring rain to the dry lands, ensuring the fertility of the soil and the abundance of crops. In the arid regions of the ancient Near East, where agriculture was the cornerstone of life, the arrival of rain was not just a seasonal event. It was a matter of life and death. Baal's storms brought much-needed water, which ensured a successful harvest, provided food for the people, and kept the cycle of life moving. In a land where droughts could easily bring famine and ruin, Baal was viewed as a benevolent and necessary force for survival. But his storms were not only life-giving, they also had a destructive side. While rain brought fertility to the earth, the storms Baal controlled could also unleash devastating floods. This duality of his power, nourishing and destructive, was symbolic of the fine balance between life and death, creation and destruction. Baal was both the giver and the taker, an embodiment of the unpredictable forces of nature that shaped the fate of the world. Baal, a strong warrior-like god, often shown wielding a mace or thunderbolt, symbols of his immense power over the skies. His iconography portrayed him as a mighty figure, often riding a chariot drawn by thunderous horses, speeding across the heavens to deliver storms to the earth below. This depiction of Baal as a warrior reflects his nature as both a protector and a destroyer, a god capable of both nurturing and devastating. The chariot itself was not just a symbol of his strength, but also represented the speed and unpredictability of storms. Just as a storm could roll in quickly, causing both fear and awe, Baal's chariot symbolized the sudden and unstoppable force of nature. The mace and thunderbolt held by Baal were also potent symbols of his control over the weather. Thunder, lightning, and rain could be unleashed with the strike of his weapon, reinforcing his position as the divine controller of storms. The symbolism of Baal's attributes highlighted his dual role in the cycle of life, linking him both to creation through the fertility of the earth and destruction through the devastating power of the storm. He was at the very heart of Canaanite religion, and his worship extended far beyond the simple offerings of fruits and grain. Baal was seen as the divine ruler of nature, and his worship was integral to the survival of the Canaanite people. The Canaanite agricultural society depended heavily on his favor, especially since the region's climate could be unpredictable and harsh. Rituals dedicated to Baal often revolved around prayers for rain, good harvests, and protection from natural disasters. Temples and shrines were built in his honor, with the most significant being located on the high places or hills, symbolic of his dominion over the heavens. These high-altitude locations allowed worshippers to feel closer to the gods, and Baal's temples were often built atop the mountains, reinforcing his connection to the sky and the storms he ruled. Among the most common rituals were sacrifices. The sacrifices were seen as offerings to Baal to secure his favor. These rituals were performed to appease Baal's anger in times of drought or storm, as well as to honor his role as the giver of rain. In addition, ritual feasts and dances were performed during festivals to celebrate Baal's power, and these gatherings often included chanting and prayers, calling for his presence. The Canaanites believed that Baal's presence on earth was essential for fertility, not only for crops, but for the fertility of people and animals as well. Therefore, his worship involved not just the material aspects of the harvest, but also symbolic acts of ensuring prosperity and harmony with the forces of nature. His worship was not limited to the Canaanites alone. His influence spread to many neighboring regions, including Ugarit, where his myths and stories were recorded in clay tablets. The gods of the Canaanites had vast and complex mythologies, and Baal stood at the center, revered by kings, priests, and the common people alike. Yet this deep devotion and the rituals tied to it would later become a point of conflict with other emerging religious traditions, particularly as the figure of Baal came into opposition with Yahweh, the God of Israel. One of the most significant mythological conflicts in Baal's story is his battle with Yam, the god of the sea and chaos. Yam, in many ancient mythologies, is not merely a god of the waters, but also represents chaos, the uncontrolled forces of nature that disrupt harmony. His domain over the sea is symbolic of destruction, unpredictability, and the destructive potential of water when it is not controlled. In Canaanite mythology, Yam sought to assert his dominance and challenge Baal's authority. The sea god, representing the untamed and chaotic forces of the ocean, desires to overthrow Baal's rule over the heavens and earth. However, Baal, the god of storms, does not simply bow to the whims of chaos. The battle between Baal and Yam is portrayed as a fight for cosmic order, with Baal defending his dominion over the natural world and maintaining harmony between the elements. The myth reveals a clash of powers, Yam's chaotic, uncontrollable force versus Baal's mastery over the storms and the rain. Baal's victory over Yam is a symbolic triumph of order over chaos. By defeating Yam, Baal is shown to control not just the storms but the very forces of nature that affect the cycles of life and death, water and drought, creation and destruction. The sea, once a source of danger and disorder, is thus brought under Baal's reign. This victory is vital for maintaining cosmic balance, as it ensures that the forces of nature are properly aligned and under the control of a god who sustains life rather than destroys it. Baal's triumph over Yam marks him as a protector of both humanity and nature. And this myth is often interpreted as symbolic of the necessary tension between chaos and order. One cannot exist without the other, but only through balance can creation flourish. Baal's struggles are not limited to the forces of chaos embodied by the sea. His most personal and existential battle is with Mot, the god of death in the underworld. Mot's role in Canaanite mythology is as the bringer of death, and he represents the inescapable, inevitable end that all living things must face. In contrast to Baal, who brings life and fertility through storms and rains, Mot's domain is finality and destruction, seeking to claim Baal and strip the world of life. This battle between life and death is more than just a clash of two gods. It is symbolic of the eternal struggle between existence and oblivion. The myth follows a narrative where Mot, desiring to take control of the natural world, challenges Baal for supremacy, seeking to bring him down into the underworld. The conflict between them represents the cycle of life and death, where death's shadow looms over all creation. Yet life, embodied by Baal, must fight to overcome it. After a fierce struggle, Baal is defeated by Mot and is taken into the underworld, signifying the inevitable descent into death. However, just as storms bring both destruction and renewal, Baal's story does not end in death. Baal's resurrection is central to his myth. The gods of the pantheon, particularly his sister Anak, fought to bring him back to life, symbolizing the cyclical nature of existence. Baal's return from the underworld represents the rebirth of nature, as he emerges once again to bring the rains and restore life to the earth. The battle with Mot highlights death's inevitability, but also the resilience of life. Just as storms bring destruction before they renew the earth, Baal's temporary defeat symbolizes the harshness of death. But his eventual resurrection affirms that death is not the end, but part of an ongoing cycle of life, death, and rebirth. Baal's victory over Mot marks his continued role as a life-bringer. The cycle of seasons, the regeneration of crops, and the continuity of life on earth. Baal's battle with Yam, the god of the sea, also represents the forces of rain and drought. Storms are necessary for the fertility of the land, but if uncontrolled, they can also cause destruction. Similarly, the struggle with Mot, the god of death, aligns with the cycle of life, death, and rebirth in nature. Just as Baal's return after death represents the rebirth of nature in the spring, his victory over death symbolizes the resilience of life through cycles of regeneration. These mythic battles mirror the cyclical nature of the seasons. Storms give way to sunny days, and life inevitably gives way to death. But death is always followed by renewal. The rise of Yahweh and the shift in beliefs. The rise of Yahweh as the supreme God in the ancient world marks a critical shift in religious thought, one that would challenge the very foundations of the polytheistic traditions in the ancient East. Yahweh, originally a tribal god worshipped by the Israelites, gradually emerged as the monotheistic God and was eventually recognized as the sole deity of the Abrahamic faiths, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. This monotheistic movement posed a direct challenge to the pantheon of gods worshipped by surrounding cultures, including Baal, who was deeply entrenched in the religious and cultural traditions of the Canaanites and other Semitic peoples. The gradual rise of Yahweh coincided with the development of a monotheistic worldview, which emphasized the belief in one all-powerful God who was the creator and ruler of the entire universe. Over time, this ideology grew stronger, particularly during the period of the Israelite monarchy, when kings like David and Solomon consolidated power and shaped the religious landscape of the ancient Israelites. As monotheism took hold, the belief in multiple gods began to fade, and Yahweh became the central figure in the spiritual lives of the Israelites. This shift came at a time when the surrounding cultures, including the Canaanites, still held on to polytheism, with Baal worship at its core. The rise of Yahweh as the supreme God led to a gradual decline in Baal's influence. His role as a vital force in agriculture, fertility, and storms was increasingly overshadowed by Yahweh's claim to ultimate sovereignty and control over all creation. Baal's existence as a rival to Yahweh can be seen as a reflection of the deep ideological and theological conflicts that emerged between the Canaanite and Israelite worldviews. Baal, as the storm god and deity of fertility, represented the natural, earthly forces that governed life, abundance, and prosperity. He was seen as a protector of the land, essential for the agricultural cycles and the well-being of the community. Baal's influence was widespread, and his presence was felt in both nature and human affairs. His storms brought rain, and his fertility ensured abundant crops and livestock. In contrast, Yahweh's image was that of a God of order, justice, and control, a deity who was not merely connected to nature, but who ruled over it. Yahweh's supremacy was associated with the idea of divine sovereignty and absolute monotheistic power, not just over Israel, but over the entire cosmos. This placed Yahweh directly at odds with Baal, whose dominion over the elements and nature seemed to challenge Yahweh's absolute control. The rise of Yahweh as the singular God threatened the cultural and religious practices built around the worship of multiple gods, including Baal. The Bible reflects this tension, portraying Baal worship as a significant threat to Yahweh's authority. The Israelites were repeatedly warned not to adopt the idolatrous practices of their neighbors, particularly the Canaanites, who worshiped Baal as a central figure in their pantheon. In biblical narratives, Baal is depicted as an enemy of the one true God, Yahweh, and the worship of Baal becomes a symbol of spiritual corruption, rebellion, and idolatry. The prophetic condemnation of Baal worship. As Yahweh's influence grew, Baal worship became increasingly condemned by the prophets of Israel. These figures, considered messengers of Yahweh, saw themselves as defenders of Yahweh's unique authority. They decried the worship of Baal and called on the Israelites to reject the influence of foreign gods and return to the worship of Yahweh alone. One of the most dramatic moments in the battle between Baal and Yahweh comes in the story of the prophet Elijah, found in the book of 1 Kings. The kingdom of Israel had fallen into the sin of Baal worship under the reign of King Ahab and his wife Jezebel, who were strong proponents of the storm god. Elijah, Yahweh's prophet, challenged the prophets of Baal in a public contest to demonstrate who was the true God. The showdown on Mount Carmel is one of the most iconic stories in the Bible. Elijah called for a contest between himself and the 450 prophets of Baal to prove whose God was the true deity. Each side was to prepare a sacrifice, and the God who sent fire from heaven to consume the offering would be declared the true God. The prophets of Baal prayed, danced, and even cut themselves in an attempt to summon fire, but their God did not answer. Then Elijah prayed to Yahweh, and fire descended from heaven, consuming the sacrifice, even though it had been soaked with water. This dramatic event was a public declaration that Yahweh was the true God, and Baal was a false idol. In the aftermath, the prophets of Baal were put to death, symbolizing the ultimate defeat of Baal worship in Israel. The victory of Yahweh over Baal not only marked the supremacy of Yahweh, but also illustrated the spiritual corruption that the Israelites had fallen into through their worship of Baal and other gods. Another key figure in the condemnation of Baal worship was the prophet Hosea, who spoke out against Israel's infidelity to Yahweh, symbolizing it through the metaphor of an unfaithful marriage. Hosea described Israel's worship of Baal as spiritual adultery, turning away from their covenant with Yahweh. Hosea's words served as a call to repentance, urging the Israelites to forsake Baal and return to the one true God. Baal's struggle with Yahweh represents the clash between polytheism and monotheism, between the forces of nature and the supreme divine order. As Yahweh's power and influence grew, Baal's role as a vital and revered storm god was increasingly rejected and demonized, particularly through the prophetic condemnations in the Bible. The dramatic confrontations between Baal and Yahweh, such as the showdown on Mount Carmel, highlighted the theological battle for the hearts and minds of the Israelites, with the worship of Baal symbolizing the decline of divine truth and the return to spiritual purity through Yahweh. These ancient struggles ultimately shaped the religious landscape of the ancient East, establishing Yahweh as the sole God and relegating Baal to the status of a defeated and demonized figure. Baal's journey from a revered storm god in the ancient Near East to a demonized figure in monotheistic traditions marks a profound shift in how gods and their roles in society were perceived. In the Canaanite pantheon, Baal was initially seen as a vital, life-giving force associated with rain, fertility, and the agricultural cycles. He was not just a local deity. Baal's influence was widespread, and his worship was central to the lives of many ancient Semitic cultures. However, as the monotheistic religions of Judaism and Christianity began to take root, especially with the rise of Yahweh as the sole deity in Israelite theology, Baal's status as a divine figure began to erode. The emergence of Yahweh as the one true God directly challenged the polytheistic belief systems that placed Baal among other deities. Over time, as monotheism gained dominance, Baal, along with other gods of the ancient pantheon, became increasingly viewed as false idols, gods that were not only irrelevant but also dangerous to the spiritual purity of the faithful. In early Judaism, the worship of Baal was associated with idolatry, a major offense against the monotheistic worship of Yahweh. Baal worship came to represent a spiritual rebellion, and those who adhered to it were often depicted as enemies of Yahweh's divine order. The shift from polytheism to monotheism fundamentally transformed the way Baal was seen, from a god of the natural world to a symbol of evil, chaos, and rebellion. In Christianity, the demonization of Baal deepened. As the Christian church sought to consolidate its power and spread its influence, Baal's association with paganism and idolatry made him a target of condemnation. Baal was seen as a false god, one whose worship had led countless souls astray. Through the lens of Christianity, Baal was reimagined not only as a demonic entity, but as a powerful adversary to the true Christian God. The Bible plays a crucial role in the transformation of Baal from a storm-gone god into a demonized figure. Throughout the Old Testament, Baal worship is depicted as one of the greatest offenses to Yahweh. The prophets of Israel frequently condemned the worship of Baal and called for the Israelites to abandon this foreign deity in favor of Yahweh. This led to the portrayal of Baal worship as a corruption of spiritual truth, and Baal's followers as idolaters who turned away from the one true God. In the Hebrew Bible, Baal is often associated with idolatry and is condemned for leading the Israelites astray. Baal's name becomes synonymous with false worship and rebellion against Yahweh. The frequent conflicts between Baal's prophets and those of Yahweh in the narrative serve as a symbolic struggle between good and evil, truth and falsehood. The story of Elijah's confrontation with the prophets of Baal on Mount Carmel is a dramatic example of this dynamic. Here, Baal's failure to respond to the prayers of his prophets, compared to Yahweh's divine intervention, marks his final defeat in Israel's religious history. But it is in Christian demonology that Baal takes on a darker, more sinister form. Over time, Baal's image evolved to symbolize the forces of darkness and sin. In Christian texts, Baal became associated with the concept of Satan and demonic influence, often serving as a symbol of temptation, rebellion, and spiritual corruption. One of the most notable ways Baal's name persisted in Christian tradition is through the title Baalzebub, often referred to as the Lord of the Flies. This term, which originally referred to Baal as a deity of the flies, symbolizing decay, disease, and death, was later used in Christian texts to represent Satan or a demonic figure. In the New Testament, Baalzebub is invoked by the Pharisees as a derogatory term for Jesus, accusing him of casting out demons by the power of Beelzebub, thus equating Baal's demonic power with the prince of demons. This connection between Baal and Satan further cemented Baal's transformation into a demonic entity in Christian theology. The demonization of Baal in later religious traditions did not stop with the Bible. Over the centuries, Baal's image became increasingly demonic in both Christian teachings and occult traditions. In Christian theology, Baal's role as a demon grew, and his association with evil, temptation, and sin became solidified. Baal's transformation into a demonic figure can be seen in the broader context of medieval Christian thought, where numerous pagan gods were reinterpreted as demons or fallen angels. As Christianity spread and replaced polytheistic systems, many of the deities from these systems were rebranded as forces of evil that sought to corrupt the faithful. In this framework, Baal became a symbol of rebellion against divine order, reflecting the temptation of false worship and the consequences of idolatry. The concept of Baal as a demonic figure also permeated occultism and witchcraft. In these traditions, Baal was often seen as a demon of temptation, pleasure, and earthly power, a figure that promised wealth, power, and influence in exchange for devotion, mirroring the dark side of human desires. This association with earthly power and corruption is central to Baal's legacy as a figure who lures individuals into sin and away from spiritual purity. In folklore and demonology, Baal is often linked to other dark figures such as Moloch, Beelzebub, and even Satan. Baal's name has come to symbolize the temptation of false gods, the allure of power and prosperity at the expense of righteousness. In many occult traditions, Baal is invoked as a figure representing the darker, unrestrained desires of humanity, further solidifying his transformation from a once venerated storm god to a symbol of evil. Baal's transformation from a revered deity to a demon figure is a profound example of how religious narratives shift over time, influenced by changing power structures, ideologies, and theological developments. Once a vital storm god, central to the agricultural and spiritual life of the Canaanite people, Baal became a symbol of idolatry and sin in the rise of monotheism. Through the scriptures of Judaism and Christianity, Baal's image was reshaped from a storm god to a demonic force, linked to temptation, chaos, and spiritual corruption. In both Christian theology and occult traditions, Baal's legacy continues to echo as a reminder of the dangers of false worship and the power of the forces that seek to lead humanity astray. Despite being demonized in ancient religious traditions, Baal's influence endures in modern culture, often resurfacing in various forms in media, literature, and pop culture. From movies to novels, Baal's character continues to captivate audiences, symbolizing complex themes of power, rebellion, and the tension between good and evil. As one of the most notorious gods to be redefined in Christian demonology, Baal has been recast as both a force of temptation and a figure of misunderstood strength, often resonating with those who question traditional structures of authority and power. In modern media, Baal is often portrayed as a powerful adversary, representing chaos and destruction. He appears in a variety of genres, from fantasy and horror to superhero films and video games, frequently depicted as a dark figure wielding immense power. His image as a storm god or demonic being often aligns with his symbolic connection to nature's destructive forces, whether through storms, earthquakes, or other catastrophic events. Baal's character is frequently cast as an antagonist, one who opposes order or authority, making him a compelling figure in stories that deal with themes of rebellion and the battle against oppressive systems. For example, Baal has appeared in comic books such as DC Comics, where he is portrayed as a dark and powerful demon whose mythology is intertwined with themes of evil and power. Similarly, in movies and TV series, Baal often appears as a villain or an antagonist, representing forces that oppose the hero's struggle for justice or control. In these portrayals, Baal's historical and mythological roots are used to explore modern anxieties about power, control, and chaos. Beyond entertainment, Baal's legacy also permeates modern literature, especially in the genres of horror and dark fantasy. Authors often use Baal as a symbol of chaos, or the embodiment of a force that represents the dark side of human nature. He is frequently depicted as a demon or a supernatural entity, one whose powers are both destructive and alluring. In works of fiction, Baal may serve as a reminder of the danger of unchecked desires, serving as a warning about the consequences of rebellion against divine or moral order. In the modern occult, Baal remains a significant figure, albeit with a more nuanced and sometimes reclaimed identity. While Baal was demonized by early Christianity as a symbol of idolatry and evil, many contemporary occultists and spiritual seekers have reinterpreted Baal's figure in more positive and empowering terms. For some, Baal represents not a demonic force, but an expression of untamed natural power and rebellion against oppression. In occult traditions, Baal is often invoked as a symbol of personal empowerment, freedom, and resistance to authority. His character is appreciated for his connection to the forces of nature. Storms, rain, fertility, and abundance, which make him a potent symbol of life-giving and transformative power. Instead of focusing solely on Baal's demonized associations, some modern occultists reclaim Baal as a figure of strength and liberation, challenging the conventional views of what is good and evil. In the spiritual realm, this reimagining of Baal reflects broader trends in contemporary spirituality, where previously demonized figures are reinterpreted as embodiments of empowerment and personal autonomy. Additionally, Baal's symbolism has been adopted by some modern pagan and earth-based religions, where his association with fertility and the natural cycles of life, death, and rebirth is seen as a powerful symbol of sacred balance. In these traditions, Baal may be celebrated not for his conflict with Yahweh or his association with sin, but for his role in the cycles of growth, harvest, and renewal. He represents the force of nature that sustains life and the constant cycle of transformation, both of which are central themes in many contemporary pagan practices. In esoteric and spiritual communities, Baal's legacy as a demonized figure is sometimes questioned, and he is seen as a symbol of the misunderstood aspects of power. He is linked to the primal forces of chaos and creation, forces that, though seemingly destructive, are ultimately necessary for life to evolve. For these modern interpretations, Baal is not a figure to be feared, but one to be understood as part of the natural and spiritual order. In stark contrast to his demonization in the past, some contemporary spiritual movements have sought to reclaim Baal as a deity of empowerment, recognizing his role as a god of fertility and abundance rather than a force of evil. These modern reinterpretations are often part of a broader trend of re-engagement with pre-Christian gods and goddesses, particularly in paganism and neo-paganism, where the focus is on the connection between humans and the natural world. In some New Age spiritual practices, Baal is seen as a figure of empowerment rather than destruction. This reimagining of Baal allows people to look beyond the negative connotations of sin, temptation, and rebellion to focus on his aspects of fertility, transformation, and rebirth. The power he wields over nature, bringing rain, ensuring crops, and sustaining life, gives him a positive association as a god who nurtures and protects life, rather than one who seeks to destroy or deceive. In some contemporary occult circles, Baal is regarded as a symbol of revolutionary spirit, a reminder that challenging established authorities and embracing the chaotic and natural forces can lead to personal growth and freedom. The temptation associated with Baal's image becomes, in this context, a metaphor for breaking free from societal norms, allowing individuals to embrace their primal instincts and pursue their desires without fear of judgment. Baal's influence in modern culture and spirituality is a proof to the enduring power of his image and the complex legacy he leaves behind. From being demonized as a symbol of rebellion and sin in ancient monotheistic religions, to being reclaimed in modern occult and spiritual traditions as a figure of empowerment and natural power, Baal's journey mirrors the changing attitudes toward power, divinity, and rebellion. Today, Baal's name continues to evoke powerful imagery, whether as a force of nature in literature and pop culture, or as a symbol of personal strength and transformation in modern spirituality. His story serves as a reminder that divine figures can be reinterpreted and transformed, adapting to new cultural and spiritual contexts, and in the process, offering new meanings to old myths. His transformation from a powerful and revered storm deity in ancient Canaanite culture to a demonized figure in monotheistic religions highlights the complex and often fluid nature of religious belief systems. As a storm god, Baal was central to the spiritual life of ancient peoples, embodying the vital forces of nature, rain, fertility, and the rhythms of the earth. His power was seen as both a source of life and a force of destruction, a duality that was essential to the natural order and the survival of civilizations. His story, from a powerful and respected deity to a demon in later religious traditions, invites reflection on the nature of belief itself. In our modern world, where many deities and their symbolism are often reduced to myths or legends, what does Baal's journey tell us about the evolution of belief and the forces that shape the gods we worship? How do the cultural, political, and spiritual contexts of any given time period determine how a god is viewed, either as a source of salvation and life, or as a figure of evil and destruction? As we navigate our contemporary understanding of spirituality and the divine, Baal's transformation offers a powerful reminder of the ever-changing relationship between humanity and the gods we create, venerate, and ultimately redefine. If you enjoyed this video and want to explore more fascinating stories and insights, don't forget to subscribe to our channel, like this video, and share it with your friends. Your support helps us bring more exciting content to you. Thank you for watching.